Hey guys, my name is Shaun, and I'm here today to tell you about my experience with ME CFS and how that came about, and how I ultimately came to recover from this very troubling and difficult condition. So it all dates back to 2012. I booked a one-way ticket to Europe with a friend for a working holiday. There were some clues in the lead up to that a few months earlier that things were potentially not where they needed to be. I did get a very bad flu, and remember, I was essentially couch bound for about 2 weeks and had several flus and colds for many, many years, and a lot of signs that my immune system wasn't really working. And 2012, that's when that reached, I guess, a bit of a crescendo, and I came down with what was just another virus. But on this occasion, unlike many in the past, I didn't recover. So from that point on, as I'm sure many of you can empathize with, it became a pretty dire period in my life, and somewhat traumatizing, I guess you could say, when you have your life completely fall apart in front of you. From a practical standpoint, my career was obviously completely put on hold. I had to quit my job. I wasn't able to work any further. There was obviously the emotional toll that takes, not knowing anything about the disease, and that sort of extending to the doctors and the medical community at the time. So really difficult period, and friends and family not knowing what's going on. And you do feel as if life is sort of crumbling in front of you. My illness was quite severe. As I mentioned, I was unable to work and went from being a full-time employee to being a full-time patient. I was trying every modality under the sun to get my life back. I was pretty desperate in my attempts to recover, taking all sorts of supplements, being hooked up to IVs, and became almost a bit of a full-time researcher. All my spare time, which I had a lot of, I began reading books, journal articles, forums, taking courses, anything and everything that I could do to learn about this condition and what could be done to recover from it. I made gradual progress. There were periods where I would take one step forward and two steps back, but ultimately I was disabled for several years. It took me about 5 years to be able to return to part-time work. In the interim, I did an odd job here or there for maybe an hour or two, once or twice a week, but essentially I was disabled for many of those years and unable to really engage in life. In 2002, so 10 years later, I did make a complete recovery. I was doing quite well sort of around 2018 to 2020. Again, hadn't fully recovered, but was starting to function somewhat again. However, in 2020, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, I did hit rock bottom again, so much so that I was barely able to walk for a number of months there, and I felt as if my life was falling apart once again, albeit having not fully recovered it, but I sort of thought I was going back to where I was back in 2012 to 2017. Thankfully, this was a blessing in disguise, because it really forced me to identify the true causes behind my chronic fatigue, which ultimately led to me, completely recovering, so much so that I'm now able to work full-time, work out on a daily basis, and play competitive sport for the first time in over 10 years. So, yes, it was really important to find the true causes, and that ultimately led to me getting back my health. So I guess that sort of is a nice segue into I guess the next question, which is about my recovery and what's been helpful. I think identifying that there is another type of I guess medical paradigm out there, that being sort of that of root cause medicine or naturopathic medicine, functional medicine, whichever way you'd like to refer to it. This probably came about after reading a book by Dr. Mark Hyman around the time I became diagnosed with CFS, which was the Ultra Mind solution, and really introduced me to the concept of how a myriad of imbalances in the body can lead to body-wide symptoms. And I guess when I first was diagnosed with CFS, I can recall the basic and general recommendations from the medical community. I think that really missed the fact that each person's presentation and reasons behind their fatigue are unique. So from my point of view, you're learning about the different causes, whether that be gut health, hormones, chronic infections, emotional health, toxins, and so many other causes that underlie this condition. Being able to make that shift and realize that you really need to go after these to find out which are relevant in your case was a big driver in helping me recover. Secondly, I'd say by taking steps to empower myself, by learning about this disease. So from a practical standpoint, without doing so, I would not have been able to make the progress that I did. There were instances where I was able to fill in the gaps in knowledge of the practitioner that I was working with at the time. So, having learned about, different infections such as dental infections and sinus infections that were relevant in my scenario, they'd sort of been missed by my practitioners, and being able to sort of help assist in that process and help with diagnosis and then consequential treatment were sort of the last pieces of my puzzle that helped me get over the finish line from this illness. So coming to take an interest in learning, I think can be quite helpful, not essential. I know some people don't necessarily want to do that and would prefer some hand holding, and I think that's very fair. And in my case, it certainly was important. I think working alongside a practitioner who appreciates holistic medicine and looks through the lens, of trying to assist people or looking through chronic illness through that lens, that holistic medicine lens, is what can really lend itself to, you making progress and getting through this disease. Finally, I'd say dedication and persistence in the face of ups and downs are really important, and what's required to get through this illness. Recovery, it's not linear. So it is important to remain patient in the face of setbacks. There's no doubt that my patience was tested, and I just had to remind myself time and time again that I wasn't born this way. I became unwell with this illness when I was in my mid-20s, and there had to be a way to bring my body back to homeostasis. So having that persistence and dedication to getting my life back really did contribute to that happening. In terms of some words of advice or encouragement for people still on the journey, I guess it's important to remember that recovery is possible, and I do appreciate that can be quite difficult and hard to comprehend at times, and can sometimes bring up some really uncomfortable emotions, particularly when you're seeing other people say the same thing that I've just said when you're not well, particularly if you've been well for quite a long time. It can be quite upsetting to hear those sort of statements, and I do appreciate where people are coming from. When they have those feelings, I think that's quite normal. But just remember that can happen, and there are periods where you will lose hope, but to try and come through that and realize that everyone can recover from this illness. Much so, I think everyone can recover to certain degrees. Some people can make complete recoveries. Some people can recover to an extent where they're able to function at a level that they're happy with again. So improvement is always possible, and keep that in mind. Never lose hope, because your life can certainly improve, with the right support and steps. And with that in mind, I think taking care of yourself is really essential. Giving yourself plenty of self-care. Dealing with this illness is extremely challenging, from a coping perspective, just beyond the inherent challenges that come from, being misunderstood, not being able to live your best life, and, the crippling physiological and neurological symptoms that come with this condition. So being gentle with yourself and knowing that you're doing the best that you can do day by day. And as long as you're taking, steps each day to improve, no matter how small they may seem, whether it's, good sleep hygiene or, trying to minimize your stress levels, eating well, remaining hydrated, you're moving in the right direction. So keep focusing on what you can control day by day. And finally, I think staying connected is probably one of the most important things that one can do to sort of help cope. This condition is, again, it's inherently very isolating, particularly if you're bedbound and unable to function, unable to engage in society. It's very easy to remain or to become and remain disconnected. So making it a priority to be around supportive people, whether that be friends, family, in-person catch up, or even joining online communities that are positive and uplifting. I think they all form part of the puzzle of getting through the other side of this illness. I hope this has been helpful, and thank you very much